gentlemen, colleagues, we would like to welcome you to today's side event on human rights in Azerbaijan ahead of COP29. The discussion around one of the biggest climate change conferences that is going to be held in Baku this November has been ongoing ever since Azerbaijan gained its presidency. And following this, and also the outcomes of the presidential elections of 2024 this February, we find it particularly important to elaborate on human rights and environment concerns that is present in the region. The event is organized by Institute for Human Rights in collaboration and support with Institute for Reporters' Freedom and Safety and CİVİCUS. With no further ado, we will be starting with the address of Special Rapporteur on Environment and Human Rights, Dr. David Boyd. And while the discussion, I would like to kindly remind you that taking photos and videos is prohibited during the side event. So we will begin with the address of the Special Rapporteur on Environment.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak at this important side event on the human rights situation in Azerbaijan, where the Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, known as COP29, will be taking place later this year. There are many concerns regarding the climate, environmental, and human rights impacts of oil and gas production in the Caspian Sea region of Azerbaijan. In my role as Special Rapporteur, I have emphasized that the world needs to rapidly phase out the production and use of fossil fuels in order to address the climate crisis. Unfortunately, most oil-producing states have failed to adequately regulate the industry. As a result, local communities near production and refinery facilities often suffer disproportionate impacts on their health, human rights, and the local environment. Similarly, large oil and gas companies have failed to fulfill their human rights responsibilities, undermining climate science, greenwashing, lobbying, corruption, and other abuses of their immense economic and political power. All around the world, the oil and gas industry is harming people's health and damaging the environment. From massive oil spills to sacrifice zones, oil and gas activities have catastrophic impacts on human rights, including the rights to life, health, water, food, a healthy environment, the rights of the child, indigenous rights, and cultural rights. The oil and gas industry, the mining industry, and other major business sectors are having detrimental impacts on other human rights by shrinking civic space and attacking environmental human rights defenders. Again, this is a global problem that's causing intimidation, harassment, violence, and criminalization of environmental activists and human rights defenders. I have heard disturbing stories from Azerbaijan, including excessive force used against environmental human rights defenders for expressing concerns about water pollution from a major mining project in Gadabay district. Environmental human rights defenders are advocates for sustainable development and should be treated as heroes, not criminals. I was very concerned by shrinking civic space at the two most recent COPs, COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and COP28 in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of assembly are fundamental human rights and must be fully respected rather than violated. As host of COP29 in Baku, I urged Azerbaijan to ensure an open, inclusive meeting that places human rights at the center of all climate action. This is an obligation, not an option. One of the implications is gender equality. I was very shocked in January when President Aliyev announced the organizing committee for COP29 with 28 men and 0 women. On a brighter note, Azerbaijan voted in favor of UN General Assembly Resolution 76/300, which recognized the universal human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Azerbaijan was already among the 161 UN member states that legally recognized this right through Article 39 of the Constitution of Azerbaijan, which says everyone has the right to live in a healthy environment. Everyone has the right to gain information about the environmental situation and to be compensated for damage done to their health and property because of violation of ecological requirements. We know from decades of experience that the right to a healthy environment includes clean air, safe and sufficient water, healthy and sustainably produced foods, non-toxic environments where people can live, work, learn, and play, healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, and a safe, livable climate. Azerbaijan has work to do in each of these areas. The right to a healthy environment includes rights of access to environmental information, public participation in decision-making, and access to justice with effective remedies when this right is threatened or violated. Clearly, Azerbaijan also has much work to do in each of these areas. In my latest report to the Human Rights Council, I urge states to take systemic and transformative changes to shift from an economy based on exploiting people and nature to a human rights-based economy. This will require replacing the narrow focus on GDP and economic growth with much more holistic development indicators, enacting human rights-based climate and environmental laws that incorporate planetary limits, taxing all forms of environmentally destructive behavior, and changing business paradigms, using benefit corporations as a model. All states, including Azerbaijan, should address the planetary crisis with human rights-based climate and environmental action. A human rights-based approach is essential for 5 reasons. First, it clarifies state obligations and business responsibilities. Second, it prioritizes groups in situations of vulnerability and marginalization, those in danger of being left behind. Third, it catalyzes action and mobilizes the maximum available resources. Fourth, it ensures that there are institutions and processes for holding states and businesses accountable. And fifth, human rights-based approaches have proven to be the most effective and equitable way to achieve sustainable development. I urge all states to accelerate the human rights-based actions that are so urgently required to transform the inspiring words of the General Assembly resolution into reality, so that every member of present and future generations can fully enjoy their right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Literally hundreds of millions of lives depend on it. Indeed, humanity's future depends on it. Thank you very much.
We thank the Special Rapporteur for his intervention, and indeed, with the presidency of Azerbaijan, they have the right and obligation to tackle the global environmental crisis through initiatives rooted with human rights principles. Now I would like to turn to next video intervention by Ms. Natalia Nazadze, South Caucasus researcher at Amnesty International, who will briefly present you a general human rights situation in the country.
This year, Baku will be hosting International Climate Conference COP29 in November. This meeting has a potential to set a course towards a successful COP29 in Azerbaijan by placing human rights as its core. However, as of now, the human rights climate in Azerbaijan is not conducive to any international forums that require effective participation by local civil society. On the other hand, the government, instead of placing human rights at the core of the forum, has engaged in intensified crackdown on any independent voices ahead of the event. Amnesty International has a long-standing concerns over Azerbaijan's systemic and widespread violations of human rights, especially as it concerns rights of freedom of expression, association, and assembly. The peaceful protests have been criminalized in Azerbaijan for over a decade. Last year, authorities have violently broken up environmental protests that took place in Soyuz-Lugabadai district arresting peaceful protesters and using chemical irritants against female protest participants. Police also detained journalists that tried to cover the event, and it's noteworthy to mention that the journalists from independent access media who've investigated environmental pollution are the ones among the dozens that remain imprisoned under fabricated charges at the moment. The civil society in Azerbaijan also remains restricted. Restrictive NGO legislation continues to impose barriers such as arbitrary denial of registration and restrictions over securing funding for human rights groups. The state refuses to register in the independent associations that express themselves critically, and so those organizations cannot receive any funding, including from abroad. On the other hand, the government-organized non-governmental organizations such as Gongos are financed by the state and enjoys a pseudo-participation in decision-making. Due to its restrictive environment for civil society and repressions against dissenting voices, there is no space for effective engagement in environmental decision-making. Restrictions on basic freedoms limit the opportunities for meaningful participation of NGOs, environmental activists, and civil society, as well as for them to participate effectively in international forums like COP. Since it was announced that Baku would host COP29 summit last December, Azerbaijani authorities have intensified their crackdown on critical voices. What's unfolding is worryingly reminiscent of the crackdowns we've witnessed ahead of other international major events such as Eurovision in 2012 and European Games in 2015, which decimated the civil society in Azerbaijan, saw the closure of main organizations and unprecedented persecution of human rights defenders and activists. This time, the intensified crackdown also follows the same hallmark. Authorities have arrested the prominent critics, including anti-corruption activist Gulbadi Vadoglu and opposition leader Tofik Yagoglu, over fabricated charges, and have detained over dozens of journalists who have engaged in critical reporting on issues such as government corruption and other public policy matters. The authorities have also targeted the family members of those arrested and have frozen their salary and pension account as a way of collective punishment against those individuals. Currently, Azerbaijani human rights defenders count more than 200 people who remain in prison over politically motivated charges. Amnesty International and other human rights groups have documented how widespread the abuse of Azerbaijani authorities are over the criminal justice system to crack down on free voices and detain their critics. Amnesty International urges the Azerbaijani authorities to immediately cease the persecution of independent journalists, activists, and human rights defenders. The organization calls for immediate release of those detained and imprisoned solely for their peaceful exercise of human rights. We're also calling the COP29 organizers to fully enshrine and guarantee human rights in the host country agreement and allow free, full, and effective participation of civil society at the meeting. The agreement must be in line with UNFCCC decisions, and so the COP29 attendees can make informed decisions regarding their participation. It must also contain effective guarantees against reprisals and retributions for voicing dissenting opinions, including environmental concerns. Finally, we call the international community to recognize the urgency and gravity of the situation and urgently ensure that Azerbaijani President İlham Əliyevə and his administration respect the right to freedom of expression and other fundamental human rights ahead of COP29. It is imperative that the international spotlight on Azerbaijan at this time be used to demand respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, and not allow economic or other considerations to take priority. Thank you.
We're deeply grateful to Ms. Nazazeva for her contribution, and We do believe that the situation with civil society in Azerbaijan is alarming and it needs to be truly addressed by the international community. And with this being said, I would like to turn to the speakers on site, and I would like to begin with Mr. Arif Mamadov, former ambassador of Azerbaijan to EU and the Council of Europe. Ambassador, could you please provide us some insights on the current state of peace in the region and shed a light on any, if there are, cross-border environmental challenges that may potentially hinder the successful execution of COP29?
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would just thank Natalia Nosadze for giving thank you very much to Natalia Nosadze for giving extensive information about deplorable situation with the human rights in Azerbaijan. As I was introduced, I am a former ambassador of Azerbaijan to the European Union, Council of Europe, but recently known more like whistleblower within the Council of Europe. It was probably some of you have seen Caviar Diplomacy and Caviar Connection film, where we talk about how one country completely undermined the Council of Europe. It was the biggest scandal in the history of the Council of Europe since its establishment. Situation in the region is really very explosive. I would say that there are some information that after the Second Karabakh War, there can be the Third Karabakh War. But I believe that after the Second Karabakh War, there were so many opportunities to finally establish peace and good neighborhood in the region. We believe that there is opportunity there, and international community was calling on Azerbaijan and Armenia to recognize territorial integrity and start normalization of relationship, border and the delimitation of the border. But unfortunately, we see that despite Azerbaijan was declared host country for COP29, military rhetoric is still on the top of Ilham Əliyev's statements. He doesn't speak about the peace. He doesn't speak about regional cooperation. He just all the time speaks about war, about all the time forwarding new demands, but it's not only outside of the country. It's not only the rhetoric vis-a-vis Armenia, but we see the same trend inside the country. Situation with human rights is not just bad or very bad. It's deplorable. It's dangerous. During the last 3 months, over 15 journalists have been imprisoned on absolutely bogus charges, including the Abzats Media, Toplum TV. The last one was Toplum TV. And really, before we could at least listen to some, media from Azerbaijan, they were not completely free, but at least there was some kind of discussion. Now there is nothing to watch. Azerbaijan became Turkmenistan. It's not anymore. I don't know. I know that, of course, the Azerbaijan delegation voting right was taken at the Parliamentary Assembly, but situation is terrible. During the last 3 months, the number of political prisoners increased from 254 to 288. 43 more people were arrested on completely bogus charges during the last 3 months. It is the highest number of political prisoners 23 years after Azerbaijan became the member of the Council of Europe. As I said, that among them 15 journalists receiving funding from international organizations is considered as you are terrorist. If you receive funding for any project, environmental, I don't know, cultural, from foreign sources, it's considered that you are terrorist. You know? And this young journalists, most of these journalists who have been arrested are of the age between 25 and 35. And I have never seen situation so bad. Natalia said about Gubadubadoglu. He's professor. He was teaching at the London School of Economics. We have to be proud that we have Azerbaijani who was giving the lectures at the London School of Economics, and he was invited to give the lecture in the German, I think, the Dresden University. And this person comes to the country to see his sick mother. I had telephone coverage because Gubadi Bado, who was a good friend of mine, he said, if I am going to Baku, I said, Gubad, be careful, they can arrest you. He said, I'm London School of Economics professor, they wouldn't dare, but they dare. And Gubadi Bado, prominent professor, probably the most, the best Azerbaijani economist, who was highlighting the issues of corruption in particularly environmental problems, corruption in the state-owned company, corruption in the state oil fund. And this person is still in prison despite academic community letters, American senators, European Parliament resolutions, French Parliament resolutions, Council of Europe, and nothing is done. Aliyev is just taking the country to the whole deep black hole. And we don't see any light, at least you should see some light that maybe something can be better. And all this happens 8 months before COP29 conference in Baku. And he doesn't care, he doesn't even show the will to do something, just situations becoming terrible, and all the population is frightened, journalists are frightened, civil society is destroyed, journalism is destroyed, all opposition is destroyed, or on exile like myself, and it is just, I don't know if there is maybe North Korea, Turkmenistan, and I don't know if there is any other country with such a terrible situation. But of course, also unfortunately, the fog of war is also flying over the region, because normally, I would think that, wow, yesterday we had conversation with some people, and they say, do you think Aliyev can start the war before COP29? It's illogical. Normally the country will force such an important event, should it? But we can expect anything. If he puts in prison professors of London School of Economics, if the ambassador who dared to say that something should be done, I am in exile, I am enemy of the regime, I am spy for many countries, sometimes I am a British spy, I work for Russian intelligence, for American, for Israeli, I'm spy for many countries. And with this situation, I don't know, somebody should say on the serious level, Mr. Aliyev, you have to do something, or you don't have COP29, or nobody will come to COP29.
Thank you, Arif. Your expertise is indeed crucial and priceless in our discussion. And I would like to turn to our next speaker. It's Mr. Emin Husseynov, Azerbaijani human rights defender and investigative journalist who lives in exile. Emin, could you share your experience on the importance of civil society participation and why it is crucial for international community to do its best to support civic space in Azerbaijan when we see its vicious crackdown against independent voices within the country.
Thank you. Thank you very much to attend for our event on issues with human rights and fundamental freedoms in Azerbaijan ahead COP29. As you know, this climate change conference is biggest international event and most important, and especially during current period. And just I want to mention for previous COP28 and COP27 experience shows for usually approximately 150 head of the states, more than 75,000 participants, high-level delegates, civil society leaders, media, many people attending and discussing climate change issues during the 1 week, sometimes it's 10 days, in countries, and try to find solution for everyone, for all our planet. But unfortunately, what we observe in Azerbaijan, compared with our previous experience when Azerbaijani government tried to host important international, cultural, political, or sport events, they are using this kind of events for whitewashing their toxic, kleptocratic image. And maybe some of you know, maybe not, I just want to remind you, for since independence, we don't have democratic transitions culture in our country. Same ruling family occupying ruling floor since from 1993. And today, after Father Heydar Aliyev, current president, which is already run for his 5th presidential terms without any limits, he is ruling leader in Azerbaijan for last 20 years. And he using country national resources for only his family, or his own family economic and political interest. And if you ask him why we are talking too much about politics, rule of law, human rights, and lack of transparency and lack of accountabilities on the event which is related with the climate change, I would like to highlight for Aliyev is not top priority to thinking about climate change in Azerbaijan or climate change in the whole world. He only thinking about himself and how effectively use this event as like his political benefit. And today, it's very difficult for all of us, as like all my colleagues mentioned, for many human rights defenders, journalists, activists, environmental journalists, environmental defenders, detained just right after Azerbaijan got this host country status in November 2023 in Dubai. And all of you know for how Azerbaijan got this status. We believe for Azerbaijan managed to get this host country status with significant political support provided them from Russia, because 3 short-listed countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Bulgaria, they have to fight for this host country status. But as we believe and we understand, Russia blocked Bulgarian candidacy, and when Azerbaijan and Armenia stay on the short list, they are also pushing to Armenia, because probably, as I understand, for Armenia ratified Rome Convention. And finally, today, Azerbaijan automatically got this host country status. And we believe for not only Azerbaijani leader Ilham Aliyev tried to use this important environmental event for his political interests, another leader, authoritarian leader, is President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, also have a special plans to use these opportunities to increase his legitimacy. As you know, especially right after presidential election in Russia, when some member states, mostly democratic countries, decide to do not accept this presidential result, I'm sure for Ilham Aliyev planning to invite Mr. Putin to Azerbaijan, and both of them, Aliyev, Putin, and other authoritarian leaders, use this international climate change platform for engage with each other, cooperate, and increase their joint solidarities, because they have only one interest: to extend their political existence in their own countries, and these people really don't care about climate change and other environmental problems. I don't want to repeat some topics which is all my colleagues already mentioned. I think I will stop here, and maybe if you have questions, we are
Thank you.
exchange our view.
I believe that we have received a comprehensive understanding of the deteriorating human rights situation within the country. And I would like now to turn to our last speaker, Mr. Yves Lador. He will shed more light on the concerns in regard to upcoming COP, not per se focusing on the national situation, but from a broader perspective. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here at this important discussion. And I'd like to also thank the previous speakers for their contributions, and I'll align with what has been said by colleagues before. Now, of course, for all countries, there is a clear need of coherence if we want climate actions to be effective, and that is even more so the case for host countries. But as it was just said, I don't want to focus on the national situation, but rather on how can we ensure that COP29 will be a success, because that's what we all want at this moment, is for COP29 to be really successful. We have heard by the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment some of the challenges we have to meet, and we need the COPs to go forward and to be actually more effective than they have been until now. So, but in order to see some of the issues we have going to Baku, we have to see them also in the perspective of what has happened in previous COPs. And I'd just like to mention some of the issues we, the civil society, had to face, not all the time. This is not something which happened each time, but there had been a number of significant worries and challenges we had to face in some of the previous COPs, going actually back even to the one that happened in Poland in Katowice. For example, on some occasions, we were unable to attend and to reach the negotiation rooms where civil society does not intervene, but can have access and can follow the negotiations. And actually, considering the number of issues which are negotiated and discussed during the COPs, more than once it has revealed to be very, very important for the countries themselves to be able to receive information also from the civil society on what is being negotiated in different places. Now, not having the NGOs has proved concretely to have had very negative consequences, because some issues were missed, and then when you get to the decisions, then you have a problem, and it has happened, for example, that the decision had to be reversed because precisely nobody saw the issue coming in, because there was nobody following the discussion, and you just a few countries in a closed room who were able to go forward. This must be avoided by all means. We also have, in most of the COPs, unfortunately, we still have today a real issue for the participation of marginalized groups and economically disadvantaged. This is an issue which is repeatedly one of the problems we have, and that needs also to be overcome. We must have a full inclusive participation in all of the COPs. On the spot, unfortunately, we have also, in some of the previous COPs, met intimidation and harassment. That has also been the case actually for governmental delegations. So this is something that clearly must be abolished in the blue zones. We must be able to speak and work freely in the blue zones. We also had more serious issues in one of the COPs where members of the civil society, actually coming just from one region, and we were wondering why, but members from civil society were not allowed in, although they had been badged. They had received the badge to access the blue zone, to come into the country. They were blocked at the entrance of the country. And some of them, few, 2 or 3, were even taken at their hotel and kicked out of the country. I mean, this is something which is absolutely unacceptable and must, of course, never happen again. We have also met, and that's linked to the intimidation and harassment, some limitation of expressions, sometimes even coming directly from the Secretariat of the UNFCCC. So let's be very clear. We have a capacity here to speak, to address some very, very important issues here in this building and at the Human Rights Council. We have been restricted under the UNFCCC to say exactly the same thing as what we're saying here. So like if within the UN, you have differences. In Geneva, the Human Rights Council, you can talk about some issues, you can be very clear, you can bring even positive contributions. This is not allowed in some of the discussions and some of the events we were having in the Blue Zone in some of the previous COPs. That is, of course, must stop by all means. There's another issue which is also problematic, and I'd like to be very clear on that. There is an absence of legal clarity about the consequences due to the difference between what is allowed under the rules of the UNFCCC in the Blue Zone and the national rules. In some of the countries where we had the COPs before, it is clear that you're not allowed to criticize a country, you're not allowed to even criticize a company, you're not allowed to criticize decisions which are made, you're not allowed to criticize a negotiation process going on. This is not the case within the UNFCCC. There is a clear possibility to speak, although there has been, unfortunately, as I said before, some limitations, but you still have this possibility to speak about that. We were able afterwards to leave the countries, the host countries of the COP, without any problem. What happened next? Are we still today, and that is the case, for example, myself, are we still allowed to go back to this country without having any retaliation? We're not sure. So for a number of us now, we know that when we went to one of the COP, we cannot return to the country, and actually we should not even transit by the host country, because this is a real threat. We have no legal clarity, and we haven't been given any answer that was concrete on that from the UN authorities. So there is clear need, for example, here, to publish and to make really public the agreement with the host country. This has been requested before. This had also been repeated by a number of countries at the last meeting in June in Bonn for the subsidiary bodies. And you can find this in the AIM, the Agreement on International Meetings. So there is a clear need today to have a clear legal certainty of what are the risks that we run when we go to a COP. What will happen after the COP? The UNFCCC has met its obligation in terms of making it possible for us to speak for a number of issues. But what happened next? This must be clarified. And it must be clarified also for the media, not only just for the journalists. Media people are having exactly the same issue. Now, we have heard also just before what are the risks of conflicts and tensions due to the recent event that has happened in the region. It is extremely important, and I'm here calling all of the states who are in the room, that there is a very clear message sent to the host country and to all of the countries in the region. COP must be an opportunity to bring tensions down and to ensure a long-lasting peace. And of course, the respect of all human rights. This must be a very clear message. Let's be no doubt, if ever a conflict starts, if ever there is any provocation in the run-up of COP29, we will not be able to have COP29. The civil society then, there has been no boycott until yet, right? No boycott until today. But it will be impossible to go to a COP if ever this is in active war zones. And that starts today. It is not an issue that, okay, perhaps after the summer we can ease the tension then in order just for the COP to happen. No. There is a clear responsibility for all states, for the presidency and for the new host country in Baku to make sure that there is no conflicts and no strong tensions in order to make sure that COP29 can be a success. And of course, it will also be the responsibility of the host country after COP29 until COP30 that we will have in Brazil, to make sure that also the situation continues to be a peaceful situation. And actually, it will be a very good opportunity to make it, as I said before, a long-lasting peace. We must also make sure, and I'll finish on this, when we say that we need an inclusive participation, and some of the requests have already been mentioned by Amnesty International before, we must make sure that all of the disadvantaged and marginalized groups who are affected by impacts of climate change or, unfortunately, climate actions, they must have a capacity to be here in the COP and to sit at the table and to be heard. It is also very important that all accredited civil society organizations, without any discrimination, can access if they meet the criteria, and all of them coming from the region. There must be no discrimination on the fact of, oh, you're coming from a country with who we had problems before. No. All organizations, all the members of the different organizations must be able to attend COP regardless of what has happened before. This is also effective for the media. A lot of media people have covered the region before. We see that terminology has changed, that they use a terminology which today is not allowed, and so on. None of that can be today used as a pretext in order to refuse the participation of any media. So let's be very clear, there must be zero tolerance to any form of harassment or intimidation. And of course, there must be no retaliation. And the best, actually, would be for the host country to propose a grievance procedure, so that if some case of these type of cases arise, then we could have a very good, open and secure way to deal with these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yves. Thank you. Your statement was indeed very insightful, and I do hope that the raised concerns will be properly addressed by the future host countries. And with this being said, I would like to open the floor for Q&A, and I do encourage the audience to participate in the discussion with our panelists and to raise any questions that you may have and share your reflections to the speaker statements. As I see none, I would like to turn back to the panelists for some closing remarks. We have 10 minutes left, so I can give the floor back to our panelists to conclude really briefly on what was said. So,
I have a question.
yeah, sure. The gentleman on the back.
It's Sharif, just for the permission. I have a question regarding the situation in Karabakh and the current development of handling civilians by Azerbaijan in Karabakh. We see on the media reports that there is quite a big exodus of Armenian population from that territory. And what we would be interested to know, if you have any information from the ground, that Azerbaijan is taking any practical measures to ensure equality that it promised for ethnic Armenians and Azerbaijani, not only in Karabakh but throughout its territory. And whether there are any plans for the government of Azerbaijan to adopt a comprehensive law on equality. We know that in the Constitution the right to equality and equal treatment before the law exists, but we wonder if such equality is envisioned by the government of Azerbaijan. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I turn to my speakers who want to address it.
I can respond to second part of your questions regarding the specific law. We absolutely agree with your mentioned point. We need this in Azerbaijan, but unfortunately, for us as like civil society representatives, most of us right now we are operating really only in exile. We have 280 political prisoners, which is be able to recognize them as like political prisoners. Maybe the numbers, realistic numbers, much bigger. And in condition when you have like a whole country as like huge prison, when 10 million populations living without any rights, to speaking about not only Armenian minorities, about other minorities' rights, it's very difficult. It's very serious issues which we need to find solutions together with the government, with Azerbaijani people, including with all national minorities which is living in Azerbaijan. But in current political realities, nobody want to listen in any kind of independent voices as like us, and especially on these issues which as you mentioned.
May I, yeah, just yeah. You know, in fact, the biggest minority in Azerbaijan is Azerbaijani people themselves. You know, they don't have any rights, they don't have any freedoms, so that in the regimes like Azerbaijani regime, there is no freedom for the people regardless of their nationality, ethnic belonging, and so the situation is so bad that it's not just, you know, treatment of minorities or ethnic groups, it is treatment of entire population. The country, which is a Council of Europe member, doesn't implement any of their obligations. There is no municipal elections. We don't have municipalities. No, we have municipalities, but they are appointed by president. We you know, ordinary Azerbaijani people, you know, they all suffer from this regime. And if ethnicity or anything doesn't play any role. Of course, it adds, you know, the war, and after the war situation even made these things more complicated. And also, what I regret a lot, that the hysteria, you know, nationalism hysteria is, you know, flaring in the country. And Aliyev someday may become the victim of his own inflamed, you know, this nationalist rhetoric, because it may become dangerous for the country, but it may become very dangerous even for Azerbaijani state in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, thanks a lot. And if I may turn to some closing remarks to you, maybe you could sum up how do we ensure the international cooperation when it comes to COP29, when it comes to upholding the international obligations of Azerbaijan to respect human rights and freedoms.
Yes, thank you. Well, as I said before, I think we must make COP29 a success, and the success will not only be just what can come out of COP itself, but also how it can be a process that can help the whole region and the whole country in order to live in a better political environment. And that is not an effort that is only on the shoulders of the host country. Of course, they have the main responsibility, but it is also a responsibility for the whole of the community. And that's why I'm calling all states, and of course all stakeholders, to push in that direction and to make sure that the way we are preparing, we will meet again, all of us, for those who are preparing the next COP in June in Bonn for the subsidiary bodies meetings. It is a good moment to make sure that everything is being prepared in a good way, and that the human rights obligation that all states, which are recognized and that actually are in the preamble of the Paris Agreement, are fully respected and fulfilled. So that's how we have to prepare and to make sure that this is a success. But what is very, very important is for everybody to send a very clear and unambiguous message, and starting now. Unfortunately, we hear some delegations, and I understand that, saying, oh, this is at the end of the year, we'll start to think a bit more about it after the summer because we have so much on our plate. This is a mistake. Our positions and this type of call must be formulated right now, collectively and very strongly, so that we can ensure a really successful COP29.
Thank you, thanks a lot. a lot. And I also was told that we have one question from the room, so I give the floor to the lady.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the valuable inputs. I work for the board, the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, and I wanted to ask what specific measures you see that we can use from here to actually put both this pressure on the host, but also on UNFCCC, which is very linked to what Eve just said, but also in terms of actually sending this message if there's any specific measures you see fit.
I think it's better if your mandate holder at least intensify his negotiation with Azerbaijani government, and maybe it's also better if he's already be more outspoken related with the cases of imprisoned environmental defenders and environmental journalists. At least we can't help to everyone from all of these huge numbers of political prisoners and prisoners of conscience, but at least we need to try our best, and we believe if your mandate holder able to use his chance to bring some our colleagues out of the prison, it can be like one of the clear message to everyone who is still in jail, for you are not alone, somebody thinking about you. And the next time I think it's better, I think it's your mandate holder also able to organize like informal debate, maybe informal consultation with the member states on these issues. That is also important, and use as much as possible publicity, because Azerbaijani government tried to use this event to whitewashing themselves. It's unfortunately we have to finish in 2 minutes, but we can. Tomorrow we have, by the way, another event on UPR outcomes on Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan in the same room, and we can discuss also issues related with the human rights and COP29 in Azerbaijan and on Caspian Sea region, including in Turkmenistan. We will invite you all to join us there.
Thanks, Amin. And I think that Eve has some remarks, so I'll give you 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'll be very short. Thank you for the question. First, of course, we know that the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment is coming at the end of his mandate. There will be a successor. We'll have officially the name of the successor at the end of this session. We look forward to work with the new Special Rapporteur. And of course, what will be very important is for the successor, and that could be one of the messages given by the current mandate holder to the next mandate holder, to make sure that there is a continuity in a dialogue. As I said before, we have to look at this as an opportunity to improve the situation, to discuss, to have a positive outcome, globally speaking. And I think all of the special procedures who are concerned, not only the one on human rights and the environment, but of course, the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and Climate Change. And you have a number of others who will come to the COP like we had in the previous COPs. Their participation is extremely important, and also their collaboration. And I'll finish also on saying there is also a work that needs to be done among the UN agencies. We know that the UNFCCC works with UNDP, with the office, and with others. These type of discussions are extremely important so that the UN works as one, as a whole, and so that there is a reinforcement of these type of work among the UN agencies. And that can be extremely helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eve. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, we need to finish our discussion, but I would like to thank our audience for being present today, and I extend my deepest gratitude to our panelists for their contributions. And I do believe that we can continue our discussion on human rights in Azerbaijan in our further meetings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.